Good evening and welcome to the City of Tempe Board of Adjustment meeting for August 26, 2026. Time is now 6 p.m. The City of Tempe Board of Adjustment is authorized by the Arizona Revised Statutes and the City of Tempe's zoning ordinance. Its function is to grant relief where literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would result in an unnecessary property hardship, to interpret provisions of the zoning ordinance, and to hear appeals from any person or city official aggrieved the decision of a person responsible for the enforcement of the zoning ordinance. The board has the City of Tempe Community Development Staff Summary Reports on the items being considered at this meeting, and will use the report in their deliberations. At this time, we'll go through a roll call. Board members, please state your name for the record. The following board member is absent: Mary Foy.
Andrea Samishka. Lily Drosos.
Sean McCarley.
Kevin Morrow.
Katie Cross.
Brett, are you online?
Brett, do we have you online? Brett, if you can hear us, try to unmute yourself and just give us a okay. Okay. We still have a quorum with 6 members. Staff introductions: Eric Anderson, the city attorney. Christina. Oh, yeah, sorry, all good.
I'm new to the city and new to the city attorney's office. So my name's Christina Kinnear, and I've been assigned to serve you all as your attorney during these proceedings.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Jeff Tamilevich, Ryan Levesque, Diana Kaminsky, Warren Riviera. Sorry, I wasn't given titles with those. Ryan Levesque is Deputy Director, Diana Kaminsky, Principal Planner, Warren Riviera, Jennifer Daniels, Administrative Assistants, and Eddie Garcia for Media Services.
But on that profile, he can't unmute himself. On the profile that he raised his hand. Thank you. Board Member Siegel, it looks like you have 2 profiles. Can you sign out of one or drop the meeting in one?
Should we keep it moving? Okay. Well, we're going to keep it moving. Brett, if you are able to, just chime in when you're able. Also, during the public hearing, due to the possible number of speakers this evening, an extended agenda for the executive session, we ask that all speakers be concise and on topic to assure everyone has an opportunity to speak. All applicants and interested citizens, when your request is called or when you wish to address the board, please make sure you have filled out one of the citizens' request forms located on the table by the doors. Please submit the form to a staff member before you begin speaking at the microphone. Once your name is called to speak, step up to the microphone and clearly state your name and city of residence. For members of the public, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Staff will assist with monitoring time. Also, please note that the Teams chat box is disabled for this meeting. Brett, just checking in to see if you can hear us or communicate back. Brett? No. Oh, five. Oh, we only have five.
He's like joining under two different profiles and then dropping out of one.
Yeah, we're gonna take a brief recess.
Board Member Siegel, if you can log off out of all of the profiles and then rejoin under one, you should have the power to unmute yourself. Board Member Siegel, can you unmute yourself, please?
I'm here. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can.
All right, with Member Siegel's presence, we can resume the meeting. The next item on our agenda is consideration of the meeting minutes from the April 29th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve both the study session and the regular meeting minutes from April 29th?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Meeting minutes of the April 29th, 2026 study session and regular meeting have been approved. Oh, shoot. We're going to go back and do a vote for the meeting minutes of the study session and the regular meeting minutes from April 29th.
Board Member Shemiska,
Aye.
Board Member Josas,
Aye.
Board Member Morrow,
Abstain.
Board Member Cross,
Aye.
Board Member Siegel,
Aye.
Vice Chair McCarley.
Aye. The meeting minutes and study session meeting minutes have been approved for the April 29, 2026 session. Next on the agenda, we have a variance request. The request is for a variance to reduce the minimum front yard open structure setback from 35 feet to 23 feet, and a variance request to reduce the minimum front yard building setback from 35 feet to 28 feet in the AG zoning district with an existing planned residential district for an attached accessory dwelling unit for the Schwartz Marstock residence located at 1706 East Citation Lane. The applicant is Simon Marstock. And now we will begin the applicant's presentation, correct?
Board President, or Vice Chair, if I may, before we get started.
Yeah,
Within the last year, my daughter has become friends with the family that resides directly north of the subject property at, I believe it's 1701 East Secretariat, which is also referenced in the packet. I've met them. I've met the family maybe once or twice, but other than that, I've had no other real interactions. I believe my daughter and their children are on the swim team together as well, but that's the extent of my interactions with them. So I wanted to bring that to attention. I don't believe it creates a conflict, but I did want to raise or make everyone aware that I do have some involvement with a family whose residence has been referenced in this case.
thank you, Chair Siegel. I've had some head nods from city staff that that's not going to create any issues here. So we are good to move forward with your attendance.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'll leave it open to Simon Marstick.
Michelle is the presenter. Good evening, Vice Chair, members of the board. I'm Michelle Schwartz, 1706 East Citation Lane.
I'm Simon Marshlock, 1706 East Citation Lane.
Yeah, and over the last number of years, we've had friends and family looking to stay with us in our home. And we are looking here today to be able to accommodate that in the future. So we're planning a multi-generational space, an attached ADU onto our home. And in order to do so, we're looking for 2 variances. Sorry. The first is a variance to reduce the front yard building wall setback from 35 feet to 28 feet. This is a 7-foot reduction, which is the equivalent of 20%. The second is a variance to reduce the open structure setback from 35 feet to 23 feet, which is a 35% reduction. We'll go through a little more reasons as to why those percentages are important in a moment. But just want to note that the existing zoning and overlays will remain in place. This is not a rezoning, not design review, and not an ADU approval. So just to provide a little context of where we are, the location of the property is in South Tempe. We are south of Elliott Road and west of McClintock Drive. This is the Sunburst Farms neighborhood, which was established in 1972 through the PRD, or Planned Residential Development Process. And really something unique about this area, one, our home is three houses west of McClintock Drive. But within this area, we are actually within 600 feet of 5 different zoning categories. So to our east, we have actually the most dense at R14, and then our neighborhood, which does have the AG zoning. So as I mentioned, this is an addition onto our existing single-family home. It has 2 components to it. The first is an office and entry for our existing residence of 125 square feet. And then the attached ADU for 557 square feet, totaling 682 square feet. Again, this will be on the front facade of the existing home. One thing to note is that attached ADUs have 1,000 square foot maximum, and we're using 56% of that. So intentionally modest and taking consideration for where we are planning to build this addition. As I mentioned before, really multi-generational aging in place options. My parents recently retired, and then we're also thinking about our future and hoping our daughter will have this home one day and this can be our place when she has the main residence. Just some more context of the neighborhood. As I mentioned, it was built in the 1970s, but over time, many of these homes have been either demolished and or renovated. And then some, as an example in the lower right-hand corner, still carry that ranch-style home and have been unimproved. So really a variety of character within the community, which exists of 74 homes. And I know this is not part of this board, but thinking about the character area plan of this neighborhood, will still be a dominant single-family housing form. We are retaining the equestrian and ranch lifestyle with keeping that backyard as open space. And we're expanding multi-generational living opportunities and consistent with the neighborhood and allowing those small home options for aging in place. So going a little bit more into the site plan, East Citation Lane here on the south side of our property. And then these lots are oriented primarily north to south, with the east to west having the smaller condition. So what you see here in the yellow box is the context of where we're planning to put the addition. And as we'll go through a little bit further, we're using the only area on the site that's not restricted by the PRD. We're not impacting any backyard privacy or encroaching on side yard setbacks. Zooming in just a little bit further, the property that is most impacted by building to the south would be the property to the south. Currently, the distance between our front building setback, our front building existing wall, and the south neighbor existing wall is 122 and a half feet. You'll also note here that there's a 50-foot City of Tempe right-of-way, so extended distance for the existing road, and then potentially future improvements for sidewalks, although none exist there today. Additionally, this house to the south does currently have a use permit for an assisted living or adult care facility. When we take into account the massing of what we're looking to build here at the 28 feet, you'll note that there's still an additional 110 feet from the building wall to the property to the south with the proposed addition. Another example here, We've become aware that a lot of people don't understand where the property lines might be. Again, our property line is approximately 10 feet in from the street. So any individuals who would be looking at this addition from the street, where they'd be walking or traveling by vehicles, it would appear to be approximately 36 feet from that location. Zooming out just a little here, our property is in the middle here of these 5 homes that we will reference. If you were just to take a straight line east to west at that 28 feet, you'll happen to notice that of those 5 homes closest to McClintock, at that 28 feet, there's already impacts to the existing home. So 2 houses west, you would be hitting on that 28 feet, and the same thing for the house directly east and 2 houses directly east. Here's again a visual. On the left-hand side, you'll note there is a line that was added to show where that 28 feet would land on the concrete asphalt. And in the distance, you'll note where some of the existing homes might be if you were looking directly west from our property. Diving into the floor plan, as noted on the west portion of the building, you have the office and entry that we're planning for the home, followed by to the east, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath addition with a common room for the family room and kitchen area. As we're talking a little bit more about the second variance, I'd just like you to note here that there are, you'll see the next slide, but the 2 items that are approximately 4 foot wide by 1 foot are the columns that would,
That's triggering that variance.
that's triggering the variance for the open structure setback. Those 2 items. This is it in perspective view. Again, looking here to make sure we're keeping with that single family massing for the project and using a scale that's appropriate with what's existing there today, especially when considering height. Here's a proposed elevation on the top along with the existing rear elevation. So as we were thinking about this addition, making sure that it's consistent with the entire home, what you see on the bottom is the existing character. As noted in the packet, you'll see we had a neighborhood meeting on July 23rd, and we issued our final report on July 26th. Additionally, in addition to the required emails and mailing notifications, we did share information on the project with our neighborhood list. This was voluntary. We shared that ahead of time so the neighbors would have a chance to understand more about the project. Here are the results from our portion of the public involvement plan. Obviously, I think in your packets, you've seen additional responses that were directed to city staff where they've outlined those for you today. A majority of the questions during the public meeting and still today are regarding ADUs, CC&Rs, and some questions about the building location options and setbacks. So as we move on, as you know, these are the 4 criteria the board is looking at today and justification. So we'll go through each one of these, 1 through 4, and then in most cases, each criteria will apply to both variances. If there is an example that applies to only one, it's noted on the slide. So the first special circumstance is a conflict on using the established site standards. So as I noted, this is AG zoning, but when Sunburst Farms was annexed into Tempe, this was developed under a PRD that modified the site standards. That modification sets 35 feet, whereas the underlying ag zoning is 40 feet. The city treats the PRD like a PAD and applies these standards in perpetuity, So if we were looking at just our site today, the specifics of the site we're reviewing, we have a 35-foot setback. Yet in order to use that 35 feet in a case, we have to come here before the Board of Adjustments versus going to the Development Review Commission. So a 20% reduction, which is what we're asking for today, does meet criteria for standard use permit, but it's the zoning code that's referencing the underlying zoning that requires us to come to the board. This is confusing. I will note that as we were moving through the process in January of 2026, we did reach out about our case. In talking with the city, it's recommending or saying that we use permit standards, reduce that 35 feet at 20% down to the 28, which is what we're asking for today. All right. Another special circumstance is missing open structure language in the PRD. So again, this is the overlay that exists for Sunburst Farms. At the time when this was developed, open structure language didn't exist in the code. And today, zoning development code gives agriculture a 5-foot setback to 35 feet. So on our site, we have an open structure setback for 35 feet, and we also have a building wall setback for 35 feet. No additional is allowed in our neighborhood. That really does create a gap in the standards. And we believe that the 23 feet does harmonize with the PRD pattern of what we're asking for today. So that would be an additional approximately 5 feet from the building wall setback for an open structure. The next special circumstance is the PRD condition. So we talked a lot about these, but this is the plat map that shows and has all of the conditions on the plat map for Sunburst Farms. On the left-hand side of that plat map, you'll note here's a typical site layout. So when this neighborhood was developed, there was a standard home, not necessarily site adapted. And so when you're looking at narrower lots, you'll see on some lots, the east to west is constrained, whereas some of the properties that have a longer east to west frontage or front yard frontage have much more in the side yard setbacks. Another constraint in the PRD suggests or says depressed areas as shown below are provided for storage of storm water runoff, and filling of these areas above the elevation shown shall be prohibited. So you note this typical depressed layout is listed in our PRD document, saying that those depressed areas, which you'll note is the entire rear yard and the front yard to collect the runoff from the street, is prohibited by the PRD. An example you'll see in the lower hand corner is what that looks like when these lots are flood irrigated. Lastly, on this lot 59, which is our home, you'll note that there is additional utility easement on our property that runs the full length of the property north to south on our easternmost border. So what does that mean in reality for our site? So if you take the example of a typical depressed lot layout on the left, as we apply that to our site standards, you'll see the yellow and the red end up being areas where we're unable to add an addition to our home. With that, it also becomes clear, even on the left-hand side, that there's a few areas you could possibly add something, and that is where you'll see we looked to cite our attached ADU, which is referenced by the green outline on the right. One last special circumstance, I alluded to it earlier, but the property to the south was in operation as an adult care facility when we purchased the home, but that does create a different use or environment in our neighborhood. This is a home that's operating with 10 rental units at any given time. In fact, what you see here in front of you is actually earlier in the day from when we had our public involvement meeting at our home. Of note is that was exactly the same condition when we came here this evening, another fire truck. So recap the special circumstances or criteria 1. Really, this code conflict does not allow our property to use the setbacks we already have on our site and how the property has been viewed for the last 50 years. In general, we are asking again for 20% setback, which is a use permit case, not a variance. There is missing open structure language in the PRD, and the PRD conditions are limiting those options of where we could build, along with the utility easement and the special use on the neighbor most impacted by a development to the south. All right. Moving on to criteria 2. This strict application would deprive this property of privileges enjoyed by others. Once again, we're asking for a 7-foot reduction in the front yard setback. So within our neighborhood, there are many conditions that already exist that are encroaching on that front yard setback. And I would like to note that all of these were measured using Maricopa County assessors. We are giving grace in most instances and not including those that might come close to a limit here. Here's one example of an existing home that is 20 feet from their property line in the front yard. Another example at 28.5 feet. A third example at 29.5 feet. And a fourth example at 29.5 feet. So all these 4 homes are less than 30 feet and would possibly need a variance if that were determined by the city in the future. Additionally, there's a number of homes between that 30 and 32 feet. Again, giving grace here that potentially that measurement tool wasn't as accurate as it would be to go out and measure exactly to the property line. So within 30 to 32 feet, we have this home here at 30 feet, another home 30 feet and 4 inches, and one more home at 31 feet. This home here is 2 houses to our west. So taking into account these 3 homes plus the 4 others for a total of 7 out of 74 homes, approximately 10% of the neighborhood already have these privileges. We're not asking for any use that is not already seen in the neighborhood today. We'll do a similar example here for open structure setbacks. So when looking at Sunburst Farm homes that have an open structure in the front yard, there's currently 52 of the homes that have an open structure in the front yard. When we take a look at which one of those homes already have an open structure between 28 and 35 feet, there's 22 of these homes today. This would constitute a use permit case. Additionally, there's another 19 homes that are less than 28 feet. That would, again, take us to more of a variance type application needed in order to have the open structures that exist there today. So in total, we have 41 homes out of 74 that are non-conforming. Again, of those that have open structure, nearly 78% are non-conforming to the existing setbacks that we're being asked to conform to. And then again, 19 out of 74 is approximately 25 would need a variance for their existing conditions. We're not asking for something that doesn't already exist in the neighborhood. All right, criteria 3. Is this consistent with prior decisions? So there's been 26 variances issued within a quarter mile of our home. Those are listed here on the right-hand side. 12 of these are setback reduction cases, 9 of which The requests were greater than 40% reduction. Would like to again reiterate, we are not asking for anything out of the norm for a use permit standard, which would be 20%. As Board Member Siegel noted, we have called out 1701 East Secretariat here. That is our adjoining property to the north. That was approved most recently for a greater than 50% reduction. And I would also like to call out that 1310 East Secretariat was approved for a front yard setback reduction from 35 feet to 27 feet in December of 2000. Approval here is consistent with other decisions, prior decisions from this decision-making body. And because it's relevant to the 20%, these here are cases that were heard in the last 3 years by the Development Review Commission for a 20% or less reduction. There's 20 of these cases. Every single case was recommended by the city planning staff, and every one of these cases was approved by the DRC. This is because 20% is standard across the city. The Santoro residence specifically was a front yard setback reduction, the same as we're asking for, from 35 feet to 28 feet. Again, the variance is consistent with prior decisions from both Board of Adjustment and Development Review Commission. Criterion 4, the circumstances are not self-imposed. So we inherited these existing front yard conditions when purchasing the home in 2016. No modifications have been made to the front facade, as noted by the aerials on the left, and then the most recent 2025 on the right. We also did not impose these PRD setback requirements. These were existing from 1973 when the property was established under that PRD. We also inherited the utility easement on the property and the conditions that limit the buildable area on the site, which is the depressed areas as noted on the slide. So in summary, the variance fulfills all 4 criteria for approval. It is consistent with the privileges enjoyed by other properties of the same classification and use. It will help address an inconsistency or how the code is referencing that these cases need to be viewed. And asking for a 20% reduction is consistent with that use permit standard. It would address that incomplete or missing language that you're seeing in the neighborhood regarding open structure setback and the building wall setback, both at 35 feet. And then most importantly, really, we are here because we want to maintain the agricultural principles of open space. That's why we're not building in the backyard, and also why we're not building towards our neighbors. It does comply with the development criteria in the South Tempe or Corona Character Area Plan. It follows the requirements of the recorded PAD. We're supporting urban forestry master plan by not removing any of our trees. And it also talks about aging in place. Like Tempe has an age-friendly action plan. This is something needed in the community, and we're providing those options. And we believe this is a context-appropriate design that's consistent with the single-family form of our neighborhood. With that, I'll ask if the board has any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to look through my notes if any other board members have questions.
Oh, I'm sure I will.
I know that in the staff report, the city, Tim, we're going to bring this up, and the city has stated that the city has brought 8 different options to you of where you could place that.
Sure.
What's your statement to that, I guess?
Sure. I do have additional slides towards each one of those that I'm happy to go through if that's of interest to the board. or we can bring them up afterwards if you're still interested in seeing those reasons. I think many of which you saw, we cannot, if we're staying consistent with the PRD, building in that backyard is not an option. That was for two of them. Additionally, we are looking again to build an attached ADU. We're not looking to build a detached structure. And then a number of them were over a variety of different infrastructure already on the site, and/or were asking us to build something that would look out directly onto our neighbors.
Okay. And even though the house is attached, it's not going to connect to the main house, is that correct?
Correct. At least in the instances you've seen here, there is no circulation between the existing home and the attached ADU. That is what qualifies it under an ADU. We have talked through options on that, and should we look to consider that as an option to add that circulation, we can bring that back after hearing any public comments.
Okay.
Their report used the word circulation and you used the word circulation. Are we talking about like HVAC air circulation, or are we talking just like a door between? Okay.
So we did go through a number of questions regarding that, specifically with city staff, and it was shared that if there is no circulation between the two, that it's an ADU, it will stay as an attached ADU.
And I'm guessing the reason you're going with this is that if you tried to build on to the existing structure, did it go over a certain square footage or building size? Why go with the ADU path as opposed to just building an attached room that connects to the house?
Eddie, maybe we did explore that option. Eddie, if you can go to slide 54 for me. This is an option that we are willing to explore as an acceptable alternative, and that was really just to add that circulation space. In order to do that, there is an additional, we would need to add additional parking to our property in order to comply with the zoning requirements. Yeah.
Simon, I think you chimed in there for just a second. You used the word triggered the variance in reference to looking at the site plan, specifically the columns. Can you go back to that slide and maybe expand upon what you mean by the columns and how that triggers, so to say?
Actually, this will
Yeah, this slide will show it also, actually. So basically, those columns are added as a design element, and because they are attached to the structure, it's not considered just an overhang, it's actually considered a porch. And that's why we have to have a variance, because those columns are high. And
so the two elements that are requiring us to have the second variance that you're hearing today are these two columns in the front yard.
they were added as a design element to basically hide the doors, so that it just looks nicer from the street.
Yep. From a aesthetic perspective, we thought that was a design element that we really enjoyed and thought would tie the structure together. But it is just those two elements that are what is requiring us to come for the variance number 2.
Thank you for clarifying.
While we're still on this slide, if you did this alternative, you would need parking, which I'm sure you've thought about.
Yep.
Doesn't that trigger a 15-foot setback, and aren't you like 4 inches over from one of the?
Yeah, we've already, and Warren can talk through this, but we've already agreed to reduce that side yard in discussions with the city by those additional.
We're gonna do that no matter what.
Yeah.
we're gonna reduce it by 4 inches no matter what, so that we are exactly at 15 feet from the east yard.
We think we can find 4 inches.
Okay. Oh, I'm sure he'll have more questions.
Yeah, usually after city staff presents, we'll have some more questions, but unless there's anything else at this time. Brett, did you have any questions?
I don't.
Okay. With that, thank you for the presentation, and we are going to move into the staff presentation.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Warren Rivera. I'm a planner on staff. And first, I just wanted to apologize to for any distraction earlier. We were trying to assist folks attending online. So the variance request before you is item 3A. The first variance request is to reduce the minimum front yard open structure setback from 35 feet to 23 feet, and a variance request to reduce the minimum front yard building setback from 35 feet to 28 feet in the AG zoning district within an existing planned residential district for an attached accessory dwelling unit for the Schwartz Marstock residence located at 1706 East Citation Lane. And the applicant is Simon Marstock. So two maps to consider here, the zoning map on the left and the aerial map on the right. The predominant color and zoning on the left shows ag zoning. It's that yellow that doesn't have any hatching. And this slide just provides a zoomed in view of the property with an aerial. So now for some site context photos. This first image is the front of the home. It was taken from Google Street View in November of 2024. And that is the current condition of the existing home. Sure. Is that better? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, site context photos 1 and 2. This is the southwest corner of the property. The site photo 1 is looking north, and you can see the left side of the existing home. Photo 2 is facing east, and you can see the right-of-way and front yard area. Something to note about this street in particular is that there is not a sidewalk present along the right-of-way. Image 5 and 8 are similar. They're in the southeast corner. Image 5 shows the side of the yard where this addition would partially be encroaching. Photos 10 and 11 show the rear yard. In photo 11, you can see the outline of the existing home, and you can see additional trees along the rear of the property in image 10. 15 and 16 are similar. 15 shows the existing home in the distance with some open space and a tree, and then more trees on slide 16, or image 16. So here's the overall site plan given to staff by the applicants. I'm going to zoom in on the next slide, but this is what the current conditions of the property are. So now we're zoomed in. There's two pieces to this variance request and proposed addition. The darker gray box represents an office addition that will essentially add a new entry to the main home. And then the lighter gray box is the attached ADU. So as you can see, you'll see on the floor plan, there is not the ability to circulate between these two additions in the current version of the plans. Some other items I want to call out on this slide. There are setbacks that are shown. Starting on the right, there is a 40-foot dimension noted. That is to the existing, or thought to be the existing building wall. The opposite side of the site plan shows a 35-foot building setback. That is the setback established by the PRD, so the planned residential development. And then to the right of that dimension, there's a 28-foot setback. That is the proposed setback for the addition. And then to the right of that, there is the 23.5-foot setback, which is the other proposed variance being discussed. So here's the overall floor plan. We're going to zoom into the addition in just a second, but this is what the existing conditions of the home are. Zoomed in now, you can see on the left side, there's the office space, there's the new entry. And on the right side, you have the 2-bedroom, 2-bath ADU that has a family gathering area. As Simon and Michelle mentioned, there are two screen walls essentially that extend upwards from that patio space in front of this addition that are in line with the doors, and that's what those boxes along the bottom of the image are. Now for some elevations, you can see those screen walls to the left and right. The overall height of the proposed screen wall for the main entrance of the home is 20 feet, so that's within zoning district required maximums and minimums. The entry to the right is also screened with a smaller wall. And this next elevation is the rear of the home. That is not currently proposed to change as a facade with this project, but it's included in the slide to show kind of the rear, the perspective from the rear and the addition on the left. So for some property history, September in 1972, Sunburst Farms was annexed into Tempe under Ordinance 677 and subsequently zoned Ag. In September of the following year, Sunburst Farms, the PRD portion was reapproved by Tempe City Council. That's what solidified the setbacks and zoning standards that are currently applicable. In November of 1973, the CC&Rs were also recorded under that docket number. Staff is aware of the contents of the CC&Rs and can confirm that they contain language that references setbacks created in the PRD and have additional restrictions beyond what the PRD has and specifies. But these CC&Rs are not enforceable by the City of Tempe and are not considered in the variance requests. So in June of 1977, building permit 49490 was issued for the construction of the home at 1706 East Citation Lane. And in May of 2016, the current owner purchased the home. In June of this year, the variance that we're reviewing tonight was submitted to staff. In July 23rd was when the applicant held the neighborhood meeting, and tonight is when the Board of Adjustment is hearing this item. So we also have to talk about case history. In January of this year, Michelle and Simon mentioned a conversation with staff. So I'm just confirming the applicants did meet with planning staff at our permit center front counter to discuss the project. Staff advised at the time that they should pursue a use permit standard. This was under the incorrect determination that Section 6308, which regulates use permits and use permit standards, could be applied to the setback created in the PRD. And so in May, the applicant submitted the use permit standard request, and that's the original tracking number for it. And once that was submitted and assigned to myself, that's when the formal review begins. And so the deep dive on the code and the interaction with the code and the PRD essentially were discovered. And so in that process, we communicated to the applicant that the use permit standard can only modify development standards of the base zoning district. So the AG setback of 40 feet could be reduced to 32 feet, but the PRD setback of 35 feet could not be reduced to 28 feet. So on May 27th, staff provided comments at the close of the first review. The applicant was informed they need to pursue variances instead for the project as proposed, and the use permit standard review fees were refunded. In June of this year is when we received the variance request, and on July 13th, staff met with the applicants an additional time to discuss staff's position on the variances and the recommended alternatives that were provided to the applicants during the first round of the variance review. And so the applicant decided to proceed with the variance request, as is their right, but staff clarified in that meeting that as proposed, the variance requests do not meet the criteria of Section 6309D, and so staff would be recommending denial. Bringing it home, staff provided comments at the close of the first review after a meeting with the applicant. The comment package contained 8 alternatives which would not require variances. July 23rd was that neighborhood meeting, and August 26th is the hearing for this item. So we also have to talk about the Sunburst Farms PRD. A PRD stands for Planned Residential Development. This is very similar to a planned area development overlay where special zoning standards are requested by a developer during the review process. Each PRD is unique and typically subdivision specific. PRDs were created with a subdivision plat and often included variations to the ZDC, but PRDs and the exceptions therein used the variance process for approval. So because they are adopted by council action, Tempe honors the standards and regulations that are in them. But no new PRDs are established. Instead, variations to development standards now require a PAD overlay, a use permit standard, or a variance. So just zooming in, this mirrors some of the slides shared by the applicant. The variances granted are enumerated on the left side of the PRD. So you can see 1 is deletion of the 1 acre lot requirement, and 2 is the cul-de-sac lengths being allowed to be longer than 400 feet. And the building setbacks are noted as well. 35 feet for the front yard, 15 for the side, and an open structure setback was not specified because that wasn't a part of the zoning code at the time. So in terms of approval criteria, section 6309D gives us 4 to consider. The first is that special circumstances are applicable to the property, including its size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings. All properties within Sunburst Farms benefit from entitlements contained in the PRD, which includes allowing all properties to be less than 1 acre in size and having reduced front and side yard setbacks. This means that Sunburst Farms has subdivision-specific development standards which are less restrictive than those of the base zoning district, and this is a benefit unique to all property owners within Sunburst Farms. Also, the average lot width for properties addressed fronting Citation Lane is 137 feet, and it's true that the subject property is only 115 feet wide, which makes it one of the smallest lot widths on the street. However, the minimum required lot width in AG is 115 feet, and a property or structure meeting a zoning district minimum or maximum is not a special circumstance. There is also an irrigation line that's present on the site plan, and this runs along the east side of the property. The irrigation line within provides lots throughout Sunburst Farms and the adjacent neighborhoods the ability to flood irrigate their landscaping. The irrigation line is within a 6-foot wide easement that extends along the entire length of the eastern property line, north to south. So no construction would be permitted in the easement area, but that is eclipsed by the PRD setback of 15 feet. So 5 and 16 don't become 21, the setback is just 15 feet. However, that irrigation easement does interact with ADU regulations, so the irrigation easement represents a 1 foot of additional setback when applied to an ADU. The property is a standard rectangular shape and size for this subdivision and has no topographical restrictions or unique locational challenges warranting deviation from the standards beyond what is already granted through the PRD. Alternative locations which would not require a variance were provided to the applicant during the review process. So criteria 2 is the strict application of this code will deprive such property of privileges enjoyed by other properties of the same classification in the same zoning district. Adherence to the code does not deprive the property owner of privileges enjoyed by others. All property owners in Sunburst Farms enjoy the benefit of the underlying PRD, which includes reduced minimum lot sizes and reduced front and side yard setbacks while still being zoned AG. And the AG zoning district has unique standards in land uses not found in other more dense residential zoning districts. This includes allowing commercial horse stables with a use permit and the keeping of small farm animals, for example. All property owners in Sunburst Farms are allowed to apply for the construction of an accessory dwelling unit or ADU. And normally accessory structures which are not ADUs, so like barns, workshops, garages, those are required to meet the setbacks of the primary residence in the AG zoning district. However, the minimum side and rear yard setbacks for ADUs is 5 feet in all zoning districts. So staff provided the applicant with 8 alternative scenarios for the addition, which would not require a variance. Some would have required an administrative review only, like a building permit, and others, a use permit standard reduction would have been required, depending on their final design. But the applicant elected not to pursue these alternatives. So it should also be noted that in addition to the roof covering in the front of the home could extend from the existing building wall a distance of 5 feet with an administrative-only approval of a building permit. And the proposed open-air patio addition could extend even further into the front setback with the approval of a use permit standard by the Development Review Commission and a building permit. So for this application, staff only considered requested entitlements within Sunburst Farms and further narrowed that analysis to only reductions which affected front yard setbacks. So Exhibit 3 on the right shows those 3 cases. 1 and 2 are use permit standards. Item 3 is a variance. So if a use permit standard or a variance are approved and subsequently not constructed, the entitlement becomes void after a year. So the only other variance approved, item 3 that's noted, reduced the setback to 31 feet, and the use permit standards reduced the front yard setbacks to 32 feet on both properties. And so these variance requests that we're hearing tonight, if approved and subsequently constructed, would be the largest reduction granted for properties within this subdivision. Criteria 3, the adjustment authorized shall not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and zone in which the property is located. So this request, if approved and constructed, would represent a special privilege inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity, zone, and subdivision. The only other variance that reduced a front setback to a building addition, which was approved and subsequently constructed, is located at 1710 East Secretariat Drive for the purpose of a covered patio and non-livable garage addition. The board previously approved a variance to reduce a front setback to 27 feet, but that addition to the home was never constructed, which means the entitlement expired after a year's time had passed, and those are the case numbers for that. So should the board decide to grant the variance requests, a reduced setback of 31 feet would be conforming to the other relief granted under the prior variance, and a reduction to 32 feet would represent the maximum reduction allowed by the use permit standard process if they were to apply for it today. Both scenarios, though, would require the applicant to redesign their project. So 2 other properties have received reduced front yard setbacks via the approval of use permit standards. However, the approved reductions were limited to no more than 20% of the base zoning district, which is 40 feet, so that dropped them down to 32 feet. Okay, finally, criteria 4, a variance may not be granted if the special circumstances applicable to the property are self-imposed by the property owner. The variances are self-imposed. Additions are allowed on residential lots. ADUs are allowed on residential lots. Use permit standards are an alternate public hearing process allowed for residents. However, the applicant decided to pursue an addition to their home which expressly requires relief of the applicable PRD setbacks and the Zoning and Development Code via the variance process. Alternative design solutions are feasible with or without the use permit standard reduction, and staff's part in analyzing those alternatives is simply, does this meet the code, yes or no? Modifications to the attached ADU would remove the need for the requested variances if the affected portions of the facade were demolished and the ADU brought in 8.5 feet. The review process for the construction of the addition and ADU would be administrative and not require additional entitlement. Criteria 4 can be met and has been met in other situations if a lot or a structure has nonconformity to the ZDC requirements because of city actions such as right-of-way acquisition. And this application's request for variances are not the result of a city action and instead are an additional variation requested above the unique zoning standards applicable to all properties in Sunburst Farms. So the neighborhood meeting was held on July 23rd. 17 people, including staff and the applicants, were in attendance. Generally, the attendees expressed concern for the addition regarding its location and its intended use as an ADU, and the applicants provided their reasoning for why the addition had to be in the front of the house and clarified that the construction in the rear yard does not align with their desires or planned use for it. Staff also answered procedural questions about CC&Rs, ADUs, and how the ZDC interact with each of those topics. And so to date, staff have received 5 letters in support, 28 letters of opposition, 2 phone calls of opposition, and a petition of 30 signatures opposing the variances that were provided by a neighbor in Sunburst Farms. So to just visualize the support and opposition, staff created this map. Green circles represent support, red represent opposition. The numbers within represent the instances of support or opposition from those addresses. If someone signs a petition and writes a letter, that's one instance of an opposition. It's not double counted. So a little about CC&Rs. The city is aware of particular CC&Rs that are applicable to other owners or to all owners within Sunburst Farms and has received multiple questions from the public on the interaction and enforcement between CC&Rs and the city's codes and processes. But staff have informed members of the public and continues to reiterate that CC&Rs are private agreements and that the city has no authority to enforce or adhere to private agreements as a result of a request brought before the city. So it's the responsibility instead of the property owners to be in compliance with any obligated CC&Rs, and the Board of Adjustment should also be aware that these parameters, and adhere to the review criteria established in the code. Any claim of violation of CC&Rs needs to be resolved privately between the parties involved. A little clarification on ADUs. The Tempe ZDC defines an attached ADU as not having internal circulation to the home. So if there is internal circulation, so you can walk from one side to the other, the structure is considered an addition. It's just part of the main home. An ADU is an independent living space. If the variances are approved and later the scope of this changes the ADU into a room addition, the main home and all additions would be required to meet the side yard setback of 15 feet for the site and to provide the required number of off-street parking spaces for a home with 6 bedrooms, which is 3 spaces located outside the required front yard setback. And there is no requirement for additional parking if the project scope remains an ADU. If the board decides to approve the variances, staff provided a recommended condition that clarifies these requirements. So as for staff's recommendation, we are recommending denial, but we also included the non-standard and standard conditions of approval for this case. So the non-standard one, if approved, is that if the ADU is modified to allow for internal circulation to the main residence, the addition shall comply with all other setbacks within the PRD for Sunburst Farms and the parking requirements of the Zoning and Development Code. No additional variances shall be granted for this addition. And then as for our standard conditions of approval, these are attached to basically every variance request and use permit that we process. The variance is valid for the plans as submitted date and is not applicable to any future modifications to the subject site. And the variance is only valid after a building permit has been obtained and the required inspections have been completed and the final inspection has been passed. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. One item that I'm thinking about is in the presentation from the other group, they mentioned that other properties in the PRD are closer to the street than that 35 feet. Why are those other houses closer, and was so like a variance obtained when they were building the houses, or is, I guess, what's the explanation?
Sure. So it's honestly a case-by-case basis. Some of the properties that were shown on screen were referencing a side yard setback, not a front yard setback. So the side yard setback is reduced. The street side setback is 20 feet in the current ZDC. As for existing conditions, after a home is constructed, right-of-way tends to expand over time to accommodate for utility lines and infrastructure. So any of those takings that happened over time may result in nonconformity. But there's also the way in which staff reviews these projects. So we don't drive around, for example, and cite every property that doesn't have a conforming setback. Instead, what happens is when that property owner decides to make an addition or a modification, then we review their property and their property history to try to understand how those conditions came to be.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had related to, it's kind of an engineering question. I don't know if you will have the answer, but you may, and you may have looked into it. The dipped area, the backyard where they're saying they can't put anything, are they able to get an engineer, have the backyard redesigned, if they want to, I know they said they didn't want to attach it. Theoretically, could they use that area to build on if it were re-engineered?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions from board members?
Okay, I'll go first. If they just wanted to go from 40 feet to 32 feet, they could get that through a use permit. Can you just walk me through what a use permit for that would look like?
Yes, and just as a point of clarification, Board Member Morrow, the Board of Adjustment could approve a reduced setback of 32 feet here tonight as an alternative to this request. But the use permit standard process uses a different section of the code for approval, and it has different criteria for approval. Often, the use permits that staff processes are for land uses, not for setback reductions. There are additional requirements essentially if a use permit standard is being applied for. However, when compared to the language within the criteria for approval of a variance, the use permit standard language is much easier typically for an applicant to meet in terms of the burden of proof.
Was the city, if you can tell me, was the city planning to approve the use permit before they found out it couldn't be used to take it to a 28-foot setback?
That's a great question. So I'm going to go to the case history to have up while I answer that. So staff doesn't make a determination on formal application review until the project is in and has worked its way through the review process. So that had not occurred when the recommendation for the use permit standard had been made. And so whenever it was brought in for the use permit standard and assigned to myself, that's when I discovered that those two sections do not interact.
And the 8 alternatives the city proposed, was one of them to just go to a 32-foot setback and apply for a use permit for
Yes.
that? Okay. Can you, I don't think your slide had it, but can you kind of quickly go through what some of the other 7 proposals were?
7 proposals?
Or the 8 alternatives? Yeah.
Yeah, so again, the staff really just looks at does what's proposed meet the code? We do not consider preference or perhaps highest and best use of the applicant's perspective. So we're only looking at does it meet the code with or without a use permit standard or variance in this case. And so the alternatives that were proposed included additions to the side and rear of the home, as well as those to the front. The applicant does have some exhibits that show those specific comments, but those examples were shared with the applicant in the red line documents that were sent back to them after the first formal review of the variance.
And I have the schematic in front of me. Because it's an ADU, which is only a 5-foot setback to the side, they could theoretically get a use permit to 32 feet in the front and then wrap it around the whole side of the building 5, I guess 5 plus 1.
Yeah.
That would not be maybe very aesthetically pleasing for anybody, but
Right. So again, we're only looking at does it meet the code, or how well does it meet the code? There are requirements on a maximum square footage for ADUs. So assuming that those weren't exceeded, then technically that would be accurate and possible.
and then I have one more question, and then somebody else can talk. I'm mostly looking at this thinking about the building setback, and I sort of am looking at the overhang as the side dish, for lack of a better analogy. Would you agree that the lack of any provision in the zoning code in the 1970s providing for separate overhang setbacks is a possible ground for variance?
I don't know that I could comment on that specifically, but I guess I would just say generally, like, the zoning code does change over time. And so that was added later because we received, a number of requests to make those modifications to existing homes. And so a need for a separate setback was identified.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more of a special circumstance. I just couldn't think of it without it in front of me. I guess that's something we can talk about. Any other questions? I'm tired of my own voice.
Would you mind going back to that slide with the 3 homes that were also granted entitlements for setback reductions in the front?
Certainly.
And just go over, so it looks like the 2 use permit standards, they received a reduction from 40 to 32. And then what was the variance? What was the reduction given for the variance? Or can you correct me if I'm...
Certainly, Board Member Drosos. So 1710 East Secretariat Drive was the variance request, and that brought these front setback from 40 feet to 31 feet. As we talked about, the PRD has an established front setback of 40 feet. So when we were going through the case history that was pulled for these different entitlements, we discovered that the content of that variance referenced the front setback of the ag zoning district instead of the PRD. But all the same, the variance was approved to 31 feet.
Thank you, that's all I had.
What was the justification for not being self-imposed on that? Or do you know?
On that case specifically, I do not.
Any other questions from Brett? Any other board members?
No.
Okay. And now we're going to open up the floor to public comment. Do we have any comment cards?
I do not have any cards at this time.
Okay. Any closing thoughts from the applicant? Oh.
Even if we requested online?
Why would you say something about my house? My house has nothing to do with your house. And that's a problem.
If anybody else wants to speak, please fill out a card at the front and we'll get that.
Sorry for the confusion. My name is John Barton.
Real
My
quick,
wife, Debbie.
I believe I got to announce it. We have John and Debbie Barton.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, you're good.
My wife Debbie and I live at 1714 East Citation Lane. We've been there for 28 years. We are the homeowners of the shared property line with the applicant on the east side. We are opposed to the request for the variance. We feel that the request fails to satisfy the criteria set forth in section 309, as you've already heard. We also feel the variance as requested has the potential to set unwanted precedents. Additionally, the project as planned has front access only with no access to the main home or the expansive backyard. We are concerned that the ADU will become a rental with on-street parking and the associated hazards that come with that. Further, the proposed structure is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. As noted, we share the property line with Michelle and Simon. We've been neighbors for 10 years. Our objection is not personal. We feel there are other ways to obtain the stated objective without infringing on the setbacks and the character that make up Sunburst Farms. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, I have Jackie Beals.
Hello, thank
Hello.
you for your time. And I think that's awesome that this is a volunteer committee and wow, you're to be applauded. Anyway, my name is Jackie Beals. I live on the other side of Simon and Michelle at 1620 East Citation. I've lived in my home for 45 years together with my husband Dave, who died in 2024. I am opposed to the variance for the reasons that have already been outlined. I'm not going to take your time to go over that. My other concern about the addition is that at a meeting that was held on July 23rd, the question of why they don't build out in the back, and Simon repeatedly said that's his sanctuary. He doesn't want anybody in his backyard. And the question was asked, well, how about if family's there? He said, no, I do not want my family in the backyard, which raises some issues with my own personal opinion of families. And also the fact that, you know, they did outline that the backyard is a depressed area and thus not feasible to have a unit built back there. Many, many homeowners in Sunburst Farms have garages, barns, and casitas, ADUs, in their backyard. So I don't feel like that's a concern. Also, I would like just to point out that, yeah, their daughter is 15. Who knows what a 15-year-old wants to do? Maybe they won't even want to stay in Tempe. Who knows? I mean, we're not talking about an adult daughter. We're talking about a teenage daughter. So that's what I would like y'all to be aware of. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. That is all of the public comment forms that we have. And now we have rebuttal from the applicant.
I will at one point ask you to pull back up our presentation, but
Just
Before we get started with that, and thank you everybody for your patience today with our couple issues, but are there any more public comment forms that we would like to take in? Anybody? Taking one, taking two? Okay, thank you. You guys are good to begin.
thank you, Vice Chair. I'll just address the last two comments quickly. When talking about unwanted precedents, I think we shared earlier, the precedence is already established in the neighborhood, whether it was through formal processes or not. I can attest in the last 10 years, no one has had issue with any of the other properties in the neighborhood at those distances. And it's only when the term ADU has come up that there's extreme pushback. Unfortunately, ADUs are not up for consideration here. This is at the state level, a state statute that we're required, or we're allowed to have actually 2 ADUs on our property, should we so choose to. That's not our intent. Our intent is to build an attached ADU on the front of our home for, as the reasons stated earlier. As for building in the backyard, I have. Sorry, few slides here. This is the recorded PRD, and it does state filling of these areas above the elevation shown shall be prohibited. So while an engineer might say, sure, you can build here, if you're following the recorded PRD as a part of this neighborhood development, this suggests that is not possible. So I would suggest that the answer given for can you build here, while it's been done, it does not follow the PRD as recorded. Couple other items. I mean, one comment about distance to the front yard was, could there be right-of-way changes to the front? That would still not affect our property line as it sits today. So we showed a slide here that shared a little bit more about our distances here in the front yard. While the right-of-way may change or something could be modified there, once again, our property line wouldn't change in any of those instances. And then I guess another item to continue to suggest is the criteria number 1 only allows to review section 4-202A. So if we're taking a look at what existing conditions are on our site today, there is a 35-foot front yard setback, not a 40-foot. For our property itself, it's 35 feet. And so we're asking for a 20% reduction of that, which is seen in all of the cases that we shared with you today. And then lastly, I will hit on briefly, because we've been here some time, each of the 8 suggestions at a high level. Because it came up, I think Board Member Morrow had a question on that. So option 1, and Warren suggests taking 8.5 feet on the existing home. That will basically take away 2 of the bedrooms that exist there today, which is not our intention to reduce the existing bedroom count of our main property. And in general, this actual siting that was shared by the city is similar to where we had planned to move it. Option 2, again, not that it couldn't be done, but there's a number of utility items that are here, including gas lines, high pressure water lines, shed, mature trees, and the water retention that's all going to our backyard that would need to be relocated. Also, we believe that this close to our neighboring property to the east was not something that we were looking to do for concern for neighbors' privacy. This option here also encroaches in the PRD depressed area, in addition to some of the other relocation items earlier identified. Options 4 or 5, again, in the depressed areas, along with relocation of infrastructure. And as we're starting to get towards the back of the house, I mentioned earlier, My parents retired this year. We're looking at options for what their future would look like. All of these that are at the backyard are starting at 150 feet of circulation needed to get to these, something that's not really taking into consideration aging in place and the infrastructure we're looking to provide. And then similarly, we expect this to be the option that might impact the neighbors the most. We'd have guests and other people walking the entire property line to the east, in addition to all those that enjoy the bridle path on the back end.
And also this one has it has the utility easement and also has a standpipe, so if somebody on the south end of Citation forgets to open up their valve, this will flood, which also
Happened about a week ago.
happened a week ago, yeah.
And then lastly, this was a two-story option immediately on our eastern side. This portion of our property is the highest point, and so a two-story on this portion of our property would encroach over the 30 feet. In addition, sustainability is top of mind for us. We have solar panels all covering this portion of the property. Again, not that it couldn't be moved, but our intention would be to keep that sustainability component of our home.
And also privacy issues for the neighbor to the east if you have a two-story there overlooking their backyard.
And that was it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the board?
Any other questions?
I had a math question.
I have a question.
Oh,
Go ahead, Board Member Morrow.
oh no, I'm sure Brett's is more interesting, but I'll be quick. When city staff was presenting at first, he said you could bring it back 8 feet, but then he suggested we could do a 32-foot variance, which is actually 4 feet. Was that one of the options you looked at?
The 32 feet would be a standard use permit option. I'm not, maybe that was referred to in this version, I'm unsure.
Like, as you can tell, that the modest size of this area, 557 square feet, only 56% of what's allowed. If we take away another 4 feet, it will just be really small, and the 2 bedrooms will be wiped out from the front of the house if we have to go that route.
Yeah, the dimensions of this front portion, you'll note, are 11 feet north to south. Again, we,
11'7".
11 foot
I can't see that.
blurry.
11'9".
Yeah.
But again, in thinking about accessibility here, we are definitely trying to utilize the space we best can and keeping within a standard use permit type request of a 20-foot reduction. That is would typically go before a different commission and is regularly approved as a part of that process.
Brett, what was your question?
You cited to the PRDs restricting a raise in the elevation of the backyard as one of the reasons that you don't want to do a ADU in the backyard. Aren't all the, I guess, options you're looking at essentially potentially violating the PRD? I guess my question is, it seems odd to bring up the concern about the PRD in the backyard when it doesn't sound like your neighbors will be opposing that versus the violation of the PRD in the front yard. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, this request doesn't violate any PRD requirements in the front yard. This is our proposed version. The areas that you see in pink or however it appears on your screen are the areas that are generally impacted by this component of the PRD. Those other options are not options presented by the applicant ourselves. Those were options that the city shared as other alternatives that didn't meet the needs for how we were planning to progress this project.
Maybe I misunderstood some of the information I read, but is it not included in the PRD that it's a 35-foot front yard setback?
The PRD condition does state a 35-foot front yard setback, yes.
Also, as we showed earlier, in the last 3 years, all 20% reductions were approved.
How many of those were in the front yard?
All of them.
No,
Yeah, weren't they? Okay, my bad, I apologize.
no, I have the list.
Board member,
It looks like,
so that,
I believe only one on 710 East Secretariat, it looks like,
Yeah,
was the front
That's
yard.
a variance, not a use permit.
Understood.
Yeah, I guess hitting on that one item, when we think about criteria, it was suggested that criteria 3, consistent with prior decisions, not necessarily what was actually built. The Board of Adjustment did approve a 35 feet to 27 foot. Whether the applicant chose to move forward and actually build that or not is not necessary, might not be consistent with what was approved, but this Board of Adjustment did approve that at 1310 East Secretariat.
Can you find out the number of those front yards?
Do you know when that was done?
Yes. Apologies, that was approved in December of 2000.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Hearing none, we can move into our discussion and deliberation.
Before we do that, Vice Chair, I have another question for city staff
Okay.
that I thought of. Hi. So we've been talking about the PRDs and the depressed areas in the backyard. And during your presentation, some of the PRDs are enforceable by the city and some are not. Is that one that is enforceable by the city?
Board Member Morrow, that's a good question. Essentially, the enforceability comes from whether or not it's a development standard that's listed. So that item that's talking about depressed areas is not a development standard. So we do not have the same ability to regulate it in the same way that we do setbacks or variances that are enumerated.
So it would be more like the CCNRs?
It would be similar to, but essentially over time, as people have requested new applications for things in depressed areas, that requirement is contained in the PRD and reviewed during like a building permit, but it's not applied in the same way that a zoning standard, like a setback or a variance condition that's enumerated.
So it would be considered, but maybe not?
May I interject?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the depression area that was shown in that image is representative of a standard lot for the purposes of engineering for flood control and flood irrigation. Through the engineering review process, any construction that would occur in the backyard would have to meet the current engineering standards. And obviously flood irrigation or flood control would be taken into account. That can be done through a series of different options for design, including having the building at an elevated level with a deck underneath it to allow water to flow. There's other solutions that engineering would approve. So that's not, as Warren had indicated, it's not one of the development standards that we're looking at here, but it is something that would be addressed through engineering with building permits.
Okay, that answers my question.
Just one final point of clarification to all board members. The setbacks established in the PRD for the front yard is 35 feet. Thank you.
Thoughts? Any board members? I'll tell you where I'm at. I'm having a hard time getting over the self-imposed aspect of being able to grant a variance, and that this is not, I don't believe it qualifies for being I don't think the fourth criteria is met, excuse me, I couldn't get my language right. Being that there's other options, whether the applicant likes it or not, there are other options. And it was a condition when they bought the house.
I'm thinking similarly. I mean, I think their plan is fine. I think the addition would look pretty good, but I think this is more of what they're going for, the highest and best use, which in this case doesn't really strictly meet the zoning code, and a strict enforcement of the zoning code, I don't think it prohibits them from building an ADU on the property. Because of the weird nature of the zoning and PRDs, I would be very sympathetic, as the city suggested, to doing a 32-foot variance. I don't think they want that. We could ask them if they want that, but and I think that the weird standard with the code is is definitely what would we call it? A sort of special circumstance regarding the overhang. I don't really have concerns with that, but just because this is the nicest aesthetically or highest and best use of the property doesn't mean it's compliant. So that's kind of where I'm at too. How are other people thinking?
I lean towards the two statements of our prior board members. I feel like variance is a function of relief in a way, under special circumstances that are not self-imposed. And I would lean towards strict enforcement, even though I might be sympathetic to its aims and its the use for a family.
As far as the test goes, I don't even know that I get past the first standard of the special circumstances are applicable to the property. I think there are, as Board Member Morrow pointed out, other alternatives. They might not be the most ideal or the most aesthetically pleasing, but there are alternatives in this case. I think I consider the front yard setback a little more significantly than I do the maybe the side and rear yard setbacks, simply because it's ultimately affecting everybody in that neighborhood, rather than just maybe a neighbor. And to that point, even the state statute regarding ADUs don't have a waiver for the front yard setback. They do on rear yards and side yards. So for those reasons, I'm inclined not to approve the variance.
Thank you, Brett. Any other comments from board members? None? Do I have anybody willing to make a motion? And real quick, the motion language is laid out in the Robert Rule of Order page.
I'll make a motion, and I'm going to read from it. I move to deny PL 260219 for the requested variance to reduce the minimum front yard open structure setback from 35 feet to 23 feet and to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 35 feet to 28 feet in the AG zoning district in the existing PRD for the Schwartz Marstock residence located at 1706 East Citation Lane.
I second the motion.
I'm going to reread the motion before we vote on it. The motion is to deny PL 260219 for the requested variances to reduce the minimum front yard's open structure setback from 35 to 23 feet and to reduce the minimum front yard building setback from 35 feet to 28 feet in the AG zoning district in an existing PRD for the Schwartz Marstock residence located at 1706 East Citation Lane. And we are good to move into a vote.
Board Member Shemishka,
Aye.
Drosos,
Aye.
Morrow,
Aye.
Cross,
Aye.
Siegel,
Aye.
McCarley.
Aye. Excuse me. And with that, the motion has been denied.
No, the
And
motion carried.
Oh.
The variance was denied.
Motion carried, variance denied. Apologies. And we can move into our next agenda item. And, okay.
Good evening, Vice Chair, Board Members, Diana Kaminsky, City of Tempe Planning Division. In the study session, we went over the rules of procedure with some modifications that we've made to the existing rules of procedure, and we were asking for a request to adopt the Board of Adjustment rules of procedure so that we can put those into the record. Do you have any questions from the presentation that you received earlier? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And do I have a motion to adopt the Board of Adjustment rules change on procedure?
Thank you.
Sorry,
No,
I'm-
this is Christina from the City Attorney's Office. I have a request based on some information that I received after you were provided these rules of procedure.
Okay.
That there's a form that the clerk's office has to fill out if there's a conflict. And I would just ask that in making your motion, you authorize us to do some administrative references to the form in the rules of procedure. So all it would be just referencing the form for filling out if you have a conflict.
Okay.
And that's going to be, so on the motion, it would be to approve the rules of procedure with the suggested changes to section G. I apologize, I have a cold.
202G,
Yes.
regarding conflict of interest.
One more time. I apologize.
Okay, so it's moving to approve the rules of procedure with a recommendation from the city attorney's office for a modification to section 202G, conflict of interest, to reference the city clerk's required form that's filled out when there's a conflict.
Do I have to be the one to say that?
No, whoever
Okay.
is making the motion would
Okay.
need to make reference to that amendment.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion. I move to adopt the proposed rules of procedure for the City of Tempe Board of Adjustments with reference to the suggested amendment to Rule 202G regarding disclosures.
I second.
And with that, we'll move to a vote.
Discussion?
Yes, go ahead.
I do have a quick question on that. Is there a copy we can review of the clerk's conflict of interest document?
Yes, thank you, Board Member. This is Christina, and that is available online at the clerk's website. It's the same conflict of interest form that the City Council is required to fill out. in this case, it would be modified to reference the statute requiring a conflict of interest disclosure for Board of Adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now we are good to move to a vote.
Board Member Shmiska,
Aye.
Drosos,
Aye.
Morrow,
Aye.
Cross,
Aye.
Siegel,
Aye.
McCarley,
Aye. And do we have any chair, staff updates, and/or announcements?
You have one more motion that needs to be made for the executive session. Oh, staff updates first, I apologize. So we do not have any cases scheduled for September, so we would not have a board meeting in September.
Okay, thank you. And now an vote for an executive session to hold a meeting in the Community Development Conference Room immediately following this hearing. Do I have a motion to hold the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And with that, we will have the meeting after this. Oh, I'm so sorry.
We're getting used to the roll call vote.
Yep.
Board Member Shmishka,
Aye.
Drosos,
Aye.
Morrow,
Aye.
Cross,
Aye.
Siegel,
Aye.
McCarley,
Aye. And we are adjourning our meeting. Next scheduled meeting is
To
to be determined. Okay, thank you.